Welcome to AMM 101, Fashion Industry, Chapter 3, Sourcing. So what is sourcing? Basically, the word sourcing means to look for something. So you're looking for materials and ways to get your product actually made. So it's really the task, the actual job of finding suppliers, finding companies that make the materials, the fabrics, the trims, vendors of any component, elastic, uh, buckles, thread, you name it, any component needed to make product. Now, this could be domestic, so in our case here in the United States, or it could be overseas or abroad. So it could be from China or Korea. So it also includes securing actual manufacturers, because sometimes you actually get sewers, cutters, marker makers to produce your actual product. So sometimes you might be a manufacturer, but you don't actually manufacture or have um, your own factory. You would actually contract out. You source a factory, a manufacturer that would actually do the actual sewing manufacturing portion, and that's what you source, and that's what you contract out. So it is a collaboration. That's a key word, collaboration with the manufacturer, contractor. We call them vendors. So whenever you have an outside company that you work with that either supply materials or labor for you, we call them a vendor. And this is where your products are created, or they give you supply so you can create your products. Okay, so it goes into the definition. Again, a vendor firm where a company purchases products and or processes to manufacture goods. So what do you source? Like I mentioned before, everything, all the materials needed for your product. So fabric, findings, trims, tags, packing materials, you name it, hangers, tagging guns and the little uh, tagging tails, everything to labels, to elastic, to screen printing, to services like cutting, marker making, grading, sewing, screen printing, embroidery, sublimating, finishing, garment dyeing, etc. So you can source pretty much anything to get your actual product made. So this is really important. Couple of rules. One is you need various vendors to select from. Okay, you can't just basically rely on one. That's not going to help your business, because if they're too busy, if they have another big order, your order kind of gets pushed to the side. So you need at least a couple to pick from. So if you're in a bind and you need a super rush order and one vendor's busy, then you can go to another one. So it's good to have kind of backups, if you will. When it comes to sewing in particular, you want to go for the one that best suits your needs. So in my experience, like I've had it where I worked for a small startup company, and we knew one contractor was best with t-shirts, just anything made out of jersey. There was another one that was better with the thicker fabric like fleece. And anytime we had like the nylon or the gym bags or something, we went somewhere else, because the first two contractors weren't very good with that material or with those kind of products. So you need to know who does best work on what, and that's who you send your work to. Also, for fabrics, if, I want the best knit fabric, I'd go to Antex knitting mills, because they had the best quality. Fabric was expensive, but it was good quality, and you knew what you were going to get. You get what you pay for. So you need to know which vendor is known for what is their best work, and that's who you use. You need to know the amount that you need. So anytime you need to call them, you need to know, I need some fabric. How much yardage, or I need elastic. How much do you need of that? Or I need sewing contract. Okay, what kind of machines do you need? What kind of sewing process do you need? Negotiate best price. Anytime they give you a quote, that's usually not the lowest price they can offer you. They expect you to try to negotiate the price. So please negotiate the best price. So you need to talk them down, even if it's 10 cents less per yard or 10 cents less per piece. Negotiate the price, because they're expecting you to start negotiating down. The general rule in this industry, quantity talks. So the more quantity, the lower the unit price. Definitely troubleshoot, avoid issues and mistakes. So if they tell you we need the material sent to us in this fashion, or we need this information, give it to them in the way they ask, because you want to avoid mistakes and issues. Make sure you double check everything that's given to any type of contractor you source out. And anytime you get something back, make sure that you count it, that you inspect it when you get it back. So follow-up is very important. So deliveries, quality control, hold them accountable. When they say something's going to be done, it should be done at that time. So a couple of vocabulary terms. Imports is any purchase you make overseas. abroad and it's shipped here domestically or here in the US in our case. Exports is when you purchase by an overseas company. So for example, a vendor in the US and it's shipped out to the from the country to another country. Also collection, so you'll hear a lot like collections of groups. So it's groups of related styles. So certain, especially when you go on higher end manufacturers, they send out collections to be done overseas. So some examples of sourcing, and I just wanted to show you a couple of ones. For example, M&J Trims, online Progressive Label is another one where you can see, like this is M&J Trims, and you can see they have everything. They have patches, they have rhinestones, they have so many trims. I mean, that's what they're known for. They're really known for ribbons, suede, braided trim, a lot of buttons, all sorts of different buttons. It's amazing. So they have some really good stuff here. So it's a good one to look into when you need some trims. Progressive Label is another one. So for all your label needs, and you can see they can do custom products and they have stock product, and it's all sorts of barcode, computer care labels, woven, printed, for sizing, for care labels, for brand labels, you name it, they have it basically. So these are things that you would be sourcing if you manufacture your own product. So these would be some of the things that you would actually be sourcing. Okay. In terms of jobs for sourcing, it definitely goes into the production world and the production field. So in production is where you start sourcing, and also in product development, because you have to sample it. So you need to know where you're going to, because if once you sample it and they like it, then that's where they place the order. So one of the examples is a piece goods buyer, and they work for a company that uses textiles for actual production. So they plan yardage, amount of fabric to purchase. They coordinate with production managers. They communicate with accounts payable, making sure orders are paid for, because you can't go into production until certain things are paid or deposits are made. They help monitor quality of received goods. So I have, for example, a colleague of mine. She's a piece goods buyer for Next Level Apparel, and that's what she does. She plans the amount of fabric to be used for a lot of the styles, and she coordinates with the production manager, and she definitely has to make sure that things are paid for, that things are received. She double checks. She makes sure that if anyone signs in for something that was received at its first quality, then they don't accept something that didn't pass a main inspection. One of the things when it comes to sourcing, just to clarify, the difference between findings and trimmings or trims, just so you know, people do use these words, a lot of people use these words interchangeably, like the same thing. They don't actually technically mean the same thing. Findings are product components like zippers, interfacing, fusible or non-fusible thread, lining, whereas trims are decorative. Like findings are more on the functional side, and trims are definitely more on the decorative, not necessarily functional. And you could see it in the final product, usually on top, whereas findings can be stuff that you don't necessarily see. And it's more functional, like zippers, buttons, threads, linings. Although buttons can be considered trims because you can see it as well, but they're functional. But just so you know, a lot of people use findings and trims interchangeably as if they were the same word. So it's just so you understand what the difference is. Findings are practical. They're more on they have a purpose. You don't necessarily see them technically, or I mean, you could see the thread, but it's not an item of focus, whereas trims are specifically to be kind of the focal point or area of focus. So sourcing manager. So if you really like sourcing, you like finding where to get materials, sourcing manager is a good position for you. It is a typical managerial position. You do have to work with overseas or domestic, depending on who you're ordering from. But you definitely have to communicate with a lot of other people and a lot of other companies. There's a lot of communication. You need a lot of communication. I could not stress that more to you. Communication is key. Also be able to communicate product specifications. So what the product needs, exactly what you need. Like we need a 1-inch width, elastic. We need to make sure that we have 100 yards of it. You have to be very specific and really big on negotiation. So get the lowest price, negotiate contracts, move up due dates whenever possible, etc. Now, merchandisers for a manufacturer. So sometimes certain manufacturers have a position of merchandiser, not all, but some do. And they're basically the liaison or the middleman between design, production, and sales. So not every company has someone like this. Some do, especially when they have more staff. Um, if this position exists, because if it doesn't, then typically it's done between production and design, typically production. But if you have this position, you usually develop a merchandise plan by month, and you really look at quantities. So piece by piece count. You really keep track of the SKUs. SKU stands for stock keeping unit, and you really plan those and oversee that. You really determine what are your top selling items, and you make sure that you restock those and you make more of those, that you make them in new colors and new fabrics, etc. Definitely big on shopping the market, the competition, making sure they're keeping tabs on what everybody else is doing, and definitely keep people in the company on top of any changes, whether it's things that are coming up like licensing deals, any collaborative endeavors or agreements, etc. Also, a big part of the responsibility is updating and keeping track of purchase orders, okay, or purchase sheets. Your book calls it purchase sheets. It's usually purchase orders. In other companies, the sales rep does that, so it just depends on the company. Also, import production coordinator is another position. You specifically focus on items being imported. We typically see this for home furnishings. We also see it for apparel. But you're basically the liaison with the contractor, the manufacturer. So you are in charge of all the production that's done overseas. You definitely negotiate the best cost, because that would justify getting it done overseas. So the best wholesale price, and in the country of origin that it's being made, and troubleshoot to make sure there's no issues there. In terms of, what goes into the global community, but it's just because of the internet, because of technology, most companies are forced, they have to be global. So global sourcing is kind of positions that we're starting to see more, where it's really gathering so many materials from places that are overseas. So we're now seeing global or overseas sourcing manager or sourcing coordinator. So we are seeing more of this, and understanding that you're basically working with other countries and other companies, not just domestically. So locating, purchasing, and importing or exporting goods and services. So that's your specialty. So you really need to, it helps to know the language, and needs to know with the companies that you're working with. Positions like buyer for store-owned, a foreign buying office, that can be, and market representatives as well. Okay. Licensing, also when you're sourcing, oftentimes we see companies trying to find licenses they can acquire. So just so you understand, this is very lucrative. So licensing is various product manufacturers working with a company to produce goods under its name. So a license is an actual agreement. So you need to know the licensee is the manufacturer producing the goods under a brand name, and the licensor is the owner of the brand mark. Okay, so they'll trademark it. And then they kind of rent it out, basically. So they do have to approve it. They won't say, okay, yeah, you can do anything with my name. Whatever you come up with, the licensee has to be approved by the licensor, and they have every right to say, no, I don't want that, I don't like it. So if you're into that, and it can be very lucrative. It can be anything with logos like NFL, NBA. So it could be sports. It could be, Aerosmith, Guns N' Roses t-shirts. So it could be like music. It could be all sorts of, TV shows, movies, etc. Now you can move up to licensing director, responsible for really doing the overseeing. So everything, the look, the quality, the label, delivery, distribution, you name it, everything. So you're in charge of everything. I've worked with companies like, for example, when I worked for All Access Apparel, we got the Hershey's license. But I can tell you, they can get really picky. Like Hershey's, for example, very picky. And if they didn't like it, like I remember we did nail heads, the Hershey on a brown shirt. So we, instead of foil, we did nail heads in metal. But they wanted the registered trademark, the R. And we're like, well, we can't do that with this stud. How are you supposed to do it with a nail head? And they're like, we don't care. That's not our problem. But we need that registered trademark. And if you screen printed, it looked dumb. So we kind of had to try to find a way to work around that. So we had to We put a little stud, a nail head, and it looked like a period, like Hershey's period. And then they approved it, which I still think looked kind of dumb. But it was weird how they were just really adamant. Nope, it needs to have that. And we didn't even give them the R, and then they approved it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So for example, Jessica Simpson, the Kardashians, they license out their name. And other people manufacture it, but it's under that name. So that's a licensing agreement. And it can be very lucrative. I foresee some changes, especially music and other things in the future, but for now, very lucrative. It tends to do really well. You can do trade shows for sourcing. You go to trade shows. Sourcing at Magic is a great example, where you can go to Magic, which is the biggest trade show in apparel, and you can look for sourcing. So you can go to, like, for example, sourcing. Magic has it in Vegas. There's a sourcing area just for sourcing, just for getting brand new products and materials. Also, New York in September has a sourcing event for high-end luxury brands, and you can have an exhibit there if you're a manufacturer, and as a buyer you can attend and source for actual high-end luxury supplies. So you can source for things that work for your actual brand and for your actual image. That's what's important. So if you go to the Surf Expo, it's because you're a surf brand and you want things in that category. If you're more high-end luxury, then the one in New York would make sense. So your book goes into, I'm not necessarily agreeing that it should go in necessarily in this section, but your book goes into what a production planner does, and that's actually a position I had at American Apparel. So and this goes more into after product development and after your design gets approved and a buyer chooses to go forward with that, then you produce or you plan production. So overall, what do they do? Responsible for pretty much everything. But material planning, so what fabric, anticipating all the parts needed to make that product. So everything from labels, from thread, making sure that you had everything there. So a primary task for production planners, and that's what I was for American Apparel, is reviewing forecasts of sales from the manufacturer reps or past sales performance of line items. So I worked for a blank t-shirt manufacturer, but I would look at the same time frame previous year and notice, okay, what was back ordered at that time? I need to make sure where were the big sales, what items were selling more to make sure I have more of that this time around. Is there any trends that I'm noticing that we're going to have a higher demand for this fabrication or for this style? And I would make sure that I had more of that. So I would plan the fabric because we only had limited fabric, right? So I'd have to make sure that I get how much fabric we had, how many rolls, and I would assign those rolls to specific styles, okay? Planning production based on orders and reorders. So really pay close attention to the sales staff. The sales rep typically should tell you we got a big order. But basically, depending on the quantity, you plan production based on the order. So you have to have communication with the sales staff. Scheduling and monitoring production as it is in progress. So work in progress, WIP. Working with material manufacturers, so making sure you get the fabric and then you get in the quality that you want. I've had time and time again fabric come in defective. It wasn't, and I'm like, I can't approve this. I can't use this for production because it doesn't meet our standards. But sometimes you're desperate and you have to use it. Sometimes they do the wrong color. They do something wrong and you have to make the call. Do I use it? Do I not? What do I do? Also collaborating with any key departments, in particular design, product development, anticipate any future needs or with sales, and definitely strict deadlines. It's so deadline oriented. Production, if you look at people in production, they usually don't look very happy. They're very grumpy. You're constantly stressed. If you don't like stress, if you like to take your time, this is not for you because it's very stressful. If you like to be challenged, because most deadlines seem impossible to meet, they do. They seem like, oh, that's just not going to happen. And you like the thrill of being able to meet that deadline, whereas someone else would probably like faint or pass out because they're like, can't do it, I give up. If you like that challenge and you like to troubleshoot, this is a good position, and it's a good opportunity because you do learn. Production really is the heart and soul of a factory, and you do learn a lot. It makes you a better designer, a better product developer. It just makes you better at knowing how the production process works. So It's a great position for that, but it's definitely stressful. Those deadlines really are. When I say strict, I mean strict. Um, Things have to ship on time. Time and time again, I'd have to go help the QC girl trim the stuff. I would go in there, cut the excess threads, and literally help pack the boxes up and send it down the chute so it can get shipped that day, so it could be overnighted. So very stressful, very fast paced, and I mean fast. I wouldn't go up the stairs, I would run up the stairs, and I wouldn't just sit there and kind of look like I would be typing really fast and talking really fast, as you can hear, as you can see in class, because that's what I'm used to. I'm used to really fast-paced environment. So, but it's a great learning experience. But yes, definitely really tough. I definitely am going to mention this more when we talk right after the product development in terms of design and going into production. But this is where your textbook puts this information, so we have to go over it. Okay. So hopefully this helped you. And that was chapter 3. Thank you so much for listening.